caring so much, then we would be free to change Star Wars to whatever we want it to be. But mandates are mandates, so if you are told you have to show your Jedi doing some training, here's a very brief summary of lightsaber combat form.
Hold on. I want to go back to this point here. To whatever we want it to be. Who's we, and who's going to decide what that is? Because obviously we are not going to all agree on what we want it to be.
Among them. It's too bad he never learned any other forms, though. Otherwise, he might have lasted longer than 0.2 seconds against Old Man in a Dress.
He was
one of the best duelists.
It was not the case with lightsabers. Remember all those nerds who worked on the original movies and wrote the old books? Well, they seem to think that since a lightsaber's blade is made of light, which has no mass, that would mean that the lightsaber itself has no mass, aside from the hilt.
Not true.
Which would mean that...
No, I think George was the first one to say that these things are heavy.
Yeah, so George initially said that this was Excalibur, and it was a heavy, and that's why you needed two hands on it at all times. Like, so yeah, no, it was. But tell George he's wrong about lightsabers. I guess I don't know.
Before have a drastically different weight distribution than lightsabers. If lightsabers are effectively weightless, but you have your Padawans training with heavy wooden swords, then all of the muscle memory and strength training they're building up with these exercises would be completely useless once they transition to using real lightsabers.
No,
that's also not true. Also those are not heavy.
He's also showing Acolyte because it's clearly an infraction in the lore. But if we go back to the younglings in the Gathering arc, we see Petro and the other younglings practicing with sticks.
Now, if you want an example of how this would feel, just grab your nearest sword-like weapon, a broom handle or something, and swing it around a few times. Then grab your nearest hilt-like object and wave it around. See the difference? See how strange it feels to try and strike without the weight of a blade at the end?
This guy has 0 martial training. 0. The point of training with boken or with facsimiles of the blade is to train you in indexing, vectoring, angles, and movement and footwork. You get to train with like the real weight of it through practical means, but like that stuff's not useless. Right, so we're gonna debunk this video as well. We're back again with Max of Zorro, our good friend from our hyperspace lore video that just kind of made 38 minutes of really wrong information. So
there was so much wrong. It was crazy.
I guess we're excited to see what he has to say about lightsabers. How to write lightsabers for Disney Star Wars. Let's go.
Hello there, and welcome to the Disney Star Wars Writers Room. You must be nervous. I know I was on my first day here, but don't you worry. I'm here to teach you everything you need to know about how to write for Star Wars in current year. Over the course of these training videos, you will learn a myriad of different modern writing techniques, including why cause and effect is for losers, how to emasculate your male heroes in favor of younger, less...
Emasculate?
Listen, if you need to fix something to be masculine, if you need loud noises, like I keep on hearing, man, it's like, oh yeah, the electric cars, I mean, it doesn't have the sound of the V10. Like, I mean, I'm a man, I don't really need that stuff. Like, I'm not poking fun at you if you love that stuff, but if you need it to feel some type of way about your masculinity, there's some insecurity there. But I didn't even think that this was going to be present in a lightsaber.
Less problematic protagonists, as well as a compendium on manipulating your audience through the use of cute droid sidekicks. But that's all a bit advanced for our first lesson. Today we're going to talk about something a little smaller.
Nothing you can say can possibly be advanced.
Scale, something less consequential to Star Wars as an IP. Today, we're going to talk about lightsaber fights. Now, if you're coming into this knowing absolutely nothing about lightsabers, don't sweat it. Here at Disney, being completely unfamiliar with the subject matter you're writing is not only acceptable, it's a prerequisite. Write what you know, more like write what you don't know.
Which is kind of weird because it's like the same people at Lucasfilm who worked under George. So
yeah, I kind of feel like Like, I feel like
we're
these guys
already...
know a lot more than you, Max.
The fact, yeah. We'll probably get into it more.
Wouldn't change it until it fits your worldview. In fact, the first rule of writing for a Disney project is don't get caught up in trying to make sure everything in your story makes sense or fits canon or whatever. The only people who really care about that stuff are the toxic fans. You know, the type who complain for hours and hours about world building and consistency and blah, blah, blah.
No, those are people who are actually engaging with the content critically.
Yeah.
Like,
there's nothing wrong with engaging critically with the content. I mean,
yeah, we can talk about the world building and consistency, but so like equivocating all of this stuff to them not knowing about Star Wars, being emasculated by women existing in Star Wars is not the toxic side, and the people who are talking about Star Wars and its critical aspects are the toxic ones. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, look, he's got the carpet nugget on the screen, so yeah, they are toxic, but they don't complain about world building. They complain about wokeness. they don't engage with Star Wars in that way. Spooky Kitty says, I don't know, guys, I'm not so sure this guy is being objective. Right.
We don't need that type of negativity here. And besides, we already have a process where every Star Wars script goes through a final vetting process with this guy named Pablo, our resident lore master. And it's his job to read through your script.
But he was also the lore master under George as well.
Yeah.
And make sure it doesn't contradict with something from Star Wars history. I know, one guy responsible for all of that. Isn't it great? So
no,
no, it's a story group. There's actually a bunch of people responsible.
There's
for
like 9
all of
people,
that. And also presently it all runs through Dave Filoni as well.
You just let him worry about all that nerd stuff while you focus on writing the story the way you want to. Now, if you're anything like the rest of us Disney writers, you're probably feeling the itch to want to be super.
And we're also gonna push back on that. There aren't any Disney writers. They're all just writers in Hollywood.
We're subversive in your writing. I love it. That's great. Hold on to that mentality. Subversion is such a cheap and easy way to get people.
I also want to point out that close to 2 minutes in, we have not talked about lightsabers.
Talking about your project.
Oh my gosh, is your computer on fire?
So Suki dropped a fat log, and so I lit a little candle and I just blew it out.
Gotcha. That was so weird.
Drum up some controversy. But the best way to be subversive is to first get a good surface level understanding of the way things used to work so that you know how best to undercut and reshape it to fit your narrative.
This would be a very broad description of your videos. Right. You gain a surface level understanding of how things work and then make videos about how they don't work.
It's wrong now in order to serve your own narrative. Yeah. No, that sounds about right.
And when it comes to lightsaber combat, the best place to begin is with lightsaber training. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Max, I wasn't going to have the characters in my story do any training at all. Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. Training sequences in movies are so boring, and they never, ever do anything to give insight into the characters or their worldviews at all. They just...
that's your opinion, but several training sequences in movies can have important character development.
Yeah.
Just take up runtime where more important scenes could go. But from time to time, you may find yourself in the position where the studio executives mandate that you add in these training scenes in order to pander to those toxic fans we talked about earlier. Of course,
I mean, I would agree. If you're talking about the people who always want to see training as proof that they know something, that is the toxic crowd. But I don't think that they're pandering to that crowd.
you know it's not the executive's fault that you now have a bunch of extra work to do. It's those toxic fans' fault. If they just didn't care so much.
I'm starting to think that he is pointing to toxic fans unironically. And not, like, genuinely.
I I don't know what he's trying to do.
About
I'm
this
waiting
franchise that they grew up with
point.
and built friendships around, and saw as a source of comfort in difficult times.
How far are we in already? We're 2.5 minutes in, and he said lightsabers, but we have not spoken about writing lightsabers.
Caring so much, then we would be free to change Star Wars to whatever we want it to be. But mandates are mandates, so if you are told you have to show your Jedi doing some training, here's a very brief summary of lightsaber combat form.
Hold on. I want to go back to this point here, to whatever we want it to be. Who's we, and who's going to decide what that is? Because obviously we are not going to all agree on what we want it to be.
I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a weird point to make because, like, we have Luke doing basic training over a couple hours, but he doesn't do lightsaber training at any other time in Star Wars, and then beats Darth Vader in a lightsaber fight, right? And I don't see that as being problematic because we do assume he trained in between the films, but we also. We did see Rey practicing with the lightsaber. We saw Sabine practicing with the lightsaber. We've seen Ezra practicing with the lightsaber. Like we've seen, in Obi-Wan, we saw a training session with Anakin and Obi-Wan. I feel like we've seen more lightsaber training than any other time period. By the way, it doesn't have to be bad videos. If you guys want to see us, react to or check out other videos, let us know. Send them to us, and they can be good or they can be this.
Also, I saw you guys in chat last week before I was leaving for my concert. Yes, we're live. We're talking to you guys. This isn't a premiere. All right, let's get into this.
You are told you have to show your Jedi doing some training. Here's a very brief summary of lightsaber combat forms. I know, it's going to be so boring, but trust me, understanding this little bit of history is really going to help you to subvert it much more accurately when writing your story. Now, there were 7 predominant lightsaber combat forms recognized by the Jedi Council at the time of the Clone Wars, and throughout the course of his or her or their or Zer's apprenticeship,
that was rude.
Jedi would be able to choose from one of these forms to focus their studies on and work towards gaining mastery in. Each of these forms represented a different combat philosophy, some geared more towards the offensive.
Yeah, that's where you start, and then you gradually pick up other forms. And so, like, what he's already saying is kind of incorrect. It's not like you pick a form to master. You learn the basics, and then depending on where you are with your basics, they'll be like, okay, you should go to this, or your style is like this, or like Yoda, you're tiny, you have little short baby arms, so you're gonna need to do more acrobatics so that you can do what you need to do, or whatever.
These forms represented a different combat philosophy, some geared more towards the offensive and some designed more for the defensive. And whichever form a Jedi chose to specialize in said a lot about how they viewed their role as a Jedi and how they saw the world around them. I know, super lame, right? Just do your best to stay awake. Starting off with Form 1, this is the most basic form of lightsaber combat, and it's where all Padawans begin. This is where you learn the fundamentals of how to move with the weapon, larger sweeping motions, wide, steady swings, proper stances, that sort of thing. And while
I'm assuming he's getting all of these details from the Jedi Path, because none of these finer details are explicitly said.
Or in canon, yeah.
this was usually seen as beginner stuff, and most Jedi moved on after gaining proficiency with this form, you do run across a few who took a special interest in it, Master Kit Fisto probably being the most prominent among them. It's too bad he never learned any other forms, though, otherwise he might have lasted longer than 0.2 seconds against Old Man in a Dress.
He was
one of the best duelists.
Yeah.
I forget who said it, right?
Know what he's talking about. It's a badly choreographed, scene, right? We've gotten fill-in lore to say that, there was a force scream and a stun people and that's that stuff, and that's fine. But like the choreography in Star Wars has never been perfect.
Yeah. I like my fill-in lore.
What it is.
I like my fill-in lore from Glass Abyss, where Mace used Jack's Vapad to survive in such tight quarters.
Such tight the corner, yeah.
Form 2 is all about finesse, designed for one-on-one dueling, like a fencer. Count Dooku was a master of Form 2, being so committed to maximizing the efficiency in it that he had a custom-made lightsaber hilt that curves a little to the right, allowing him to manipulate the weapon much more ergonomically and with blazing speed. At least I think that's why it's curved like that.
Did George even care about the forms? So the forms were actually first introduced in Legends. When George wrote this stuff, he didn't have forms.
Yeah. So basically, the forms came later and backfilled stuff. So it's interesting now, and as fans, we still love it. Forms weren't brought into canon until Rebels, though.
They're able to use their physical presence to quickly gain the upper hand over weaker enemies. Ahsoka also used.
Wait. Did he just? Qui-Gon didn't use 5.
Qui-Gon used Ataru.
Yeah. Does it matter if George made them before, if we all enjoy learning, discussing them? It doesn't really matter now, but it's part of canon now.
I mean, we're just answering the question. I'm not saying it's good or bad,
I feel like George didn't take Star Wars half as seriously as half of the fan base now. And he really didn't. His whole thing with Star Wars was the message of the dark side and joy, pleasure, drugs, like addiction.
The fight against fascism.
But as with all franchises, the fans have taken it and, the fans, which I'm now including in the current writers, the current storytellers now, have turned it into something galactic. And I love lightsaber forms. Every time we see lightsaber combat on a show, the Acolyte, Ahsoka, I'm pointing out that Balin uses Ataru at this point while Ahsoka is using Jar-Kai. There was a new one introduced in Ahsoka called Zatoichi.
Yeah,
and I don't remember. I don't know if they gave that a form number, but like it's all awesome lore to me.
I mean, one of the coolest things ever. If you've read the Revenge of the Sith novelization, if you haven't read it, go read it. It's fantastic. But like, one of the coolest things in that is the fight on the Invisible Hand against Count Dooku, and like they are and Obi-Wan and Anakin are kind of playing around with Count Dooku at the beginning, and then they switch fighting styles, and start going off on him, and it's such a cool scene.
Forms are as cool as far as describing what we see on screen. I don't really think they need to factor in storytelling or anything like that. No, not necessarily. Marcus DeWu says it makes sense George did not give much thought to forms, since didn't he have a lot of trouble with lightsaber fighting in the originals? So the depth with which George thought about lightsabers and sword forms was mimicking Japanese katana two-handed sword play. And then when going to the prequels, it was like they need to be faster and they need to be wielded with one hand. So let's just make it faster, like a lot of FEMA. Not FEMA. HEMA. And so that's as far as he went,
Also, you also had the limitations of the original, like Darth Vader suit for their fighting. But it kind of plays into the story, right? Because Obi-Wan was in control of that entire fight, and he's like poking and prodding and like, come chase me over here,
Yeah.
Presence to quickly gain the upper hand over weaker enemies. Ahsoka also used a variation of this form, substituting quick, nimble attacks for the heavy overhead ones, and with great success. Animated Ahsoka, of course. Old Lady Ahsoka, well, we'll get to that in a bit. Form 6.
No, you just it live action doesn't translate to the animation style.
Animation, yeah, it's not the same because humans can't do that.
Legacy asks, what was the sequel approach to forms? Those fights mostly feel very different than the other trilogies. Things with the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy didn't really deal with forms too much, if at all, because Luke was learning from texts and spirits, as far as we know in canon, right? And then what he learned from Yoda was more kind of force mastery and philosophy. and stamina stuff. We didn't really see him train in swords. Swords.
I mean, the whole purpose was that in the prequel time period, when the Jedi were closer to the height of their power, you would have these kids that grew up practicing these moves constantly and consistently. Contrast this with someone who at age 19 started picking it up. Luke is all force and all dirty fighting, dirty kicks and stuff. Which I think works.
And to go into the sequel trilogy, Rey doesn't know any forms either. She learns as much as she can from Leia and Luke, but again, Luke is the originator of learning through YouTube, and Ben is also a product of that training. But largely Ben or Kylo is a product of his instability. So his lightsaber fighting isn't indicative of any classical training. As we see when he has the Skywalker saber in Rise of Skywalker, finally gets it, then you can see some kind of form to his fighting, and he's more fluid, he's more spinny, he's flashy. But for the most part, the fights in the sequels didn't really have any forms. They were largely just kind of like winging it. And that's not to say like winging it in terms of filmmaking, but like they didn't have the knowledge of the prequel Jedi and those before them with classical training.
I mean, Luke, for a large portion of like Return of the Jedi, swings his lightsaber like it's a baseball bat. He learned from I think
Creel.
Sergeant Creel is one of the people, and then later there's a guy on an island. Luke gets like stuck on there, and he teaches him like techniques and stuff, and then he has to fight Creel again in that same run. I can't remember the person's name, but I mean there was a lot of stuff in between that helped ended up helping Luke, but it's still not the same formal training that these kids went through from birth. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. Like, to me, this represents kind of like when we use lightsabers, like in real life. We're learning spinning. We're doing, we're doing Obi-Anis. We're doing all this stuff. And then, people in our comments are like, you can't do this in a real fight. And you're like, so what? Like, I'm not going to fight people with real lightsabers. That's how the Jedi thought. And felt.
I feel like if we were all to have a fight with lightsabers, considering our sources are largely the same, we would be Obi-Wan and Anakin in that fight, doing Obi-Ani spins in front of each other and just not having any real combat intention in our fights.
But like, you can look at fencing competitions, and people have lightsaber fighting leagues, and in order to do well, they don't fight like they do in the prequels.
They'll have
they'll
have
have
the
because
lightsaber out, and then they'll go like this and go try to hit the wrists. Because that. What we see in the prequels is really cool. It's just not how it's not how fighting works. I love, seeing Obi-Wan and Anakin, Obi-Ani back and forth in front of each other, and we can make our own headcanon of like, they're having like a mental battle. Oh, I'll swing here. Oh no, but if I do that, he'll do this and this, But really, that would never happen in a fight. It's kind of like when people think, Souls is how people fight, and you can roll around on the ground. And like, it looks cool. That's not how it works. People don't have iframes. KG says, I know I'm in the minority with preferring the sequel fight style. I mean, so I don't really have a preference towards them, but I love those fights because they are emotionally charged. The Death Star 2 fight in particular with no music was so heavy.
And that was actually George's main thing, is the fights need to tell a story. You know what I mean? Like, we had that throne room fight. There was a much, much cooler version of the Mace Windu versus Palpatine fight. And we can find, maybe on the VOD, we can put up footage of that. It was going to be a lot cooler, but George was like, no, I want to be able to show the actors' faces. Yeah. Right? And Ian McDermott can't do that, so we're not doing it.
I get
that's how we got him going
I also encourage people to, like, this isn't how I want people to experience these movies, but if you've watched these movies before, particularly with any fight with Sidious and Mace Windu, or Sidious and Palpatine or whatever, go frame by frame. You can see clearly the 3D avatar that's fighting in place of Ian McDiarmid in some of these wide shots. It's horrible CGI, but thankfully with editing, you don't see too much of it. But this is what we mean by, like, if you go frame by frame on any movie, you're going to find mistakes.
It's a sort of a master of none form, combining principles from all the previous 5 forms into one diverse, well-rounded, but ultimately less powerful and less unique combination.
I would suggest, if you guys want more canon and accurate descriptions of these forms, to get Force and Destiny. It is a canon source book, but it is for the Star Wars RPG, but it's still canon. And so you have a very, very robust description of each form and what they mean in canon.
Combination of moves. And this became the standard for most Jedi at the height of the Old Republic, where combat was less common, and a Swiss Army knife of attacks that can handle most situations was seen as more practical than one powerful style that had to compensate for its weaknesses in other areas. And lastly, we have forms.
Why'd you show Yoda? Because Yoda can combat every single situation. Like, if you take someone like Yoda and compare him to, like, I don't know, Ki-Adi-Mundi, who just turns around and just stares at everyone. Yoda was like, nah, I ain't gonna give these guys a chance, and just slices their heads off. He's like, I sense your murderous intent and will not let you go.
Okay. Quick question. What's the over-under that he thinks that Mace Windu uses the dark side?
Okay, yeah, that's another one.
Is he going to say that Mace Windu uses the dark side, or is he going to know Star Wars?
He probably is going to say that he uses it, yeah.
All but banned by the Jedi Council, as it had the undesirable tendency to push one to the dark side by utilizing fear and anger, both yours and your opponents, to fuel a wild and terrifying flurry of powerful blows. Mace Windu used his own homebrew variation of Form 7, which is part of what allowed him to overcome old Palpatine, but the standard form was most famously used by Darth Maul in his fights against Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. This powerful, chaotic, unpredictable form, combined with his use of the two-bladed lightsaber, is what allowed him to hold off both Jedi for as long as he did. Now, don't forget, no one
No, it's just because he was a good fighter.
Yeah. The funny thing too is, like, I love lightsaber staff, but it is the least effective thing of all time. Like, it's not a good weapon.
No, we literally showed her training with Jedi Master Rock, the most famous rock Jedi who ever lived. That scene was amazing and not cringe, so I don't even know what they were complaining about. But
okay, so he is being sarcastic when he brings this stuff up. She was shown in the beginning of The Force Awakens to have predisposed combat ability by fighting off, and for 14 years, other scavengers. But the establishing shot was in the first act of The Force Awakens, where she fights off the people trying to take BB-8. Now, that coupled with the very intentional eye looking from staff to saber, you know, if you look at the nuances of filmmaking, you can see that she is putting 2 and 2 together and being like, maybe I can do some kind of lever translation.
How is this going to translate from this to that? And then they showed us. So yeah, it's weird.
But also,
to say that they should show training and then show her training and say, but I don't like seeing her train, so this is a bad. I don't know. I don't know what that point is.
But also the throne room scene, she didn't even show that much mastery. She was fighting 2, Kylo was fighting 5, and she gets hit multiple times by the 2. Right? Like, yeah. People like to prop Rey up as having been displayed as being the master of lightsaber forms without any training. No, she just had previous combat experience. translating the lever training of a staff to the saber, and
had
also,
access to the Force. Yeah, but I just want to say, I mean, more importantly, once you know how to freely access the Force, right? That's going to be a massive buff in all aspects, and that was the whole point of her training. You know, she did it before against Kylo Ren, but that was like a one-off, and you know, she had to learn how to actually access it on a regular basis.
For the most part, every time we react to something that they're talking about, it seems like they have not watched the movie.
Jaybird says, I actually don't think Rey wins a battle without supernatural intervention. Yeah, that's true. She doesn't win a single fight in all of Star Wars without outside help. And when she finally does against Palpatine, she died.
And honestly, that wasn't... I wouldn't even chalk that up as a victory for Rey either. Like, even though she technically won. I like to play with the semantics. Like in The Force Awakens, Rey didn't beat Kylo. Kylo lost. And that's largely because he forced himself into a situation that was disadvantageous. But in The Rise of Skywalker, Rey
he also stopped fighting her. Like she was dead to rights against a cliff.
And in The Rise of Skywalker, Rey did what Mace did. You know, he was looping the electricity back, and Palpatine, for all of his bluster, just didn't stop. So he kind of fried himself.
Yeah.
In response
and
to
wasn't she subconsciously channeling some of Kylo's knowledge via the DYAD in the throne room?
Yes.
So she had already connected to that. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is when you see her fighting against the Rock, the moves that she does against the Rock are the same moves that Kylo Ren does later in the movie against Luke.
Criticism: the executives mandated that the very first thing we see her doing in the next movie is training, which we accomplished by showing her floating with some rocks and performing a bit of light calisthenics.
That's not light calisthenics at all.
She was jumping up trees and like slash things and like... If that's light calisthenics, then what other training have we seen? Because Luke did a flip over a rock and swung on a vine. But we know he was. So what is good training? What good training is there in Star? I don't know. We can keep going.
Fine, we'll do it, but you bet your ass we're going to integrate it in the most non-diegetic, awkward, clunky way possible. Now, that'll teach you to ask for stuff.
How was it non-diegetic and clunky? Like, it showed us that she excelled at some things, but she, you know, the be with me technique eluded her, and she was struggling with that. And that it also showed us her anger getting the best of her during the training, and not knowing why. Like, there was a lot of story reasons for it, and so this is kind of the problem: is when you don't honestly engage with it, you miss so much.
The counterweight and the pommel to balance it out. And while your muscles are definitely involved with guiding the blade toward the right place, the laws of gravity and inertia have just as much to do with the power behind these maneuvers as the strength that the wielder does.
Oh, I totally forgot.
Yeah, that doesn't apply to lightsabers.
I totally forgot he was gonna. That was another argument that they were going to make. He's probably going to make the argument that there's no weight in the lightsaber. Right? And we're going to say, well, according to Kanan, you know, so we'll see.
And this was not the case with lightsabers. Remember all those nerds who worked on the original movies and wrote the old books? Well, they seem to think that since a lightsaber's blade is made of light, which has no mass, that would mean that the lightsaber itself has no mass, aside from the hilt.
Not true.
Which would mean that...
No, I think George was the first one to say that these things are heavy.
Yeah, so George initially said that this was Excalibur, and it was a heavy, and that's why you needed two hands on it at all times. Like, so yeah, no, it was. But tell George he's wrong about lightsabers. I guess I don't know.
And that the entire economy of motion would be dictated by your wrists and arms, maneuvering just the hilt to angle the blade. This is why you had to have your Padawans train with real lightsabers instead of, say, wooden swords, which, as I established...
They weren't real. They were training sabers.
Yeah, those are training sabers. And then also people did train with bokens and things like that through all time.
before have a drastically different weight distribution than lightsabers. If lightsabers are effectively weightless, but you have your Padawans training with heavy wooden swords, then all of the muscle memory and strength training they're building up with these exercises would be completely useless once they transition to using real lightsabers.
No,
that's
and he's
also
showing,
not true.
Also
those are not heavy.
He's also showing Acolyte because it's clearly an infraction in the lore. But if we go back to the younglings in the Gathering arc, we see Petro and the other younglings practicing with sticks.
Now, if you want an example of how this would feel, just grab your nearest sword-like weapon, a broom handle or something, and swing it around a few times. Then grab your nearest hilt-like object and wave it around. See the difference? See how strange it feels to try and strike without the weight of a blade at the end?
This guy has 0 martial training. 0. The point of training with boken or with facsimiles of the blade is to train you in indexing, vectoring, angles, and movement and footwork. You get to train with like the real weight of it through practical means, but like that stuff's not useless. You have to train with the basics first. You can't start with the real weight of a sword, because then you're never going to get the feel of the proper form.
You see how this could understand?
Also, you would want to use like lightweight sticks and things like that if you were sparring, for instance, at certain levels.
Trust me, if you get like a katana and then try to train kenjutsu all with a katana, you're gonna fail horribly.
Take years of training to become competent with, to be able to angle the blade in just the right way to block an incoming attack without cutting your own damn head off. This is what made the weapon so unwieldy for those who were untrained in the art of lightsaber combat, but made it the perfect pairing for a Jedi Knight. So yeah, you can just take all of that nonsense and just get rid of it. The lightsabers in your story should feel like they weigh at least 30 to 35 pounds, with the majority of that weight placed right at the tip, at the worst possible balance point, so that you're...
No.
Why does he think the weight is at the tip? I don't even understand that. Did he not watch Star Wars? Did he not watch the original trilogy? Did he not watch, Luke on the sandbar swinging his lightsaber?
I don't know where he's getting this, but his
booty hole.
George was the first one to say that lightsabers had weight. And then we get the training sequence with Sabine and Kanan, where Kanan says, "Imagine directing a flow of energy."
George was adamant that these things were really, really heavy, that we couldn't take a hand off. We always had to have two. It was like Excalibur. It was 40, 50 pounds of weight.
They were very powerful. They had a lot of energy in them. And so that was, you worked with them as if they were heavy. So because when they crashed together, they made these big explosions and all kinds of things. As we went on, we wanted to have the lightsaber fights become faster and more intense as Luke became more proficient in the art of sword fighting.
Right? Because the flow of energy is being propelled through the crystal towards the sword. And so that's acting as the counterweight pommel. And then the energy that's being cycled through the cycler is constantly, lightsabers have weight.
Imagine having a powerful water hose in your hand and trying to fight with that.
But there's no termination point. It goes back into this hose.
Like battle axes, not the one-handed riding axes of the Rohirrim. I'm talking big two-handed dwarven axes. Now, you do have to be careful with this because it could have the potential to look cool when used by larger, more muscular characters. So you want to make sure you mostly cast wafy young women in these roles instead.
Yeah, this guy is just... Okay, so he's misogynistic, obviously, because from his hyperspace video, he was talking about fallopian tubes and all that. None of this is intellectually honest or in good faith at all. It's not even funny.
We have them show in their faces how much effort it takes them to bring these weightless weapons around to bear, and throw in some guttural grunts and growls too for good measure. Forget about the composed.
Well, if in Rey's case, she literally doesn't have all.
She wasn't
of the training.
trained. Yeah,
she doesn't have all of the training that others that you're showing on screen had. Even in the Acolyte, those people had classical training. I would argue more so than the prequel Jedi we see.
Wait. So Rey was less composed than a Jedi Master?
Yeah.
Jesus.
What is it? Is she OP or is she less composed? What do you can't have both of them.
She's Schrodinger's Jedi. She is the most powerful and well-trained person, but she's so weak and has never trained. She Schrodinger's Jedi.
I mean, we should have steeled ourselves for this kind of outcome, but I'm hoping. No, I don't know if I'm. That's
Was
just
in confident cadence, the natural flow and rhythm of yesterday's duels. Instead, have your characters screech their frustrations out, like we writers do at our weekly Scream therapy sessions. This will make your fights feel more gritty and visceral, which segues us nicely into talking about lightsaber damage. Now,
so to address that notion, this seems to be a very rampant misunderstanding of how the narrative has been designed. As George said, the lightsaber fighting changed in the prequels because it was a time in which the Jedi were at the height of their martial prowess.
There were Jedi in their full flower and fighting as they were in the past, well-trained Jedi. Then we had to make the sword fights much, much faster, much more sophisticated, and much more aggressive in terms of the way they're fought.
So we see a lot of people with classical training doing fancy spins and flips and stuff, and the fighting is flashy. When you get to the original trilogy and Luke has limited access to training, and then he pushes forward that training to Kylo, who then shares a connection with Rey, all of those lightsaber wielders will be less sound than the people with classical training.
Now, with lightsaber damage these days, you're really going to want to turn that way the hell down, actually. I know we can see references from the old movies where lightsabers are incredibly powerful.
Sure, yeah, like that. Like that attack that took Darth Vader's arm off. It didn't take his arm off.
Effortlessly cutting through thick metal, even blast doors, and cutting down armored battle droids as if they were paper, slicing off limbs like it's their day job. But that's a little too graphic for modern audiences, so make sure that the lightsabers in your story just kind of bounce off of even the most basic types of armor.
Those aren't basic types of armor either. Let me get the visual dictionary. I'm back, don't worry. All right, this is the visual dictionary, guys. On the Praetorian Guards, their armor is a magnetic field bolstered armor, and guess what the lightsabers are encased in? A magnetic field. And guess what happens when you shoot a blaster or swing a lightsaber in a magnetically sealed environment?
Which is something we saw in the trash compactor in the original trilogy.
Basic
Very
types of
meticulously taken care of.
A limit on how many characters you can do this with, or even how many times per character. It's free real estate. On that note, let's pivot away from writing for a brief moment and talk about casting your characters. As I mentioned earlier, the days of casting strong, dexterous, athletic actors who have clearly put a great deal of effort into learning how.
What? I wouldn't call you and Hayden strong and athletic. They trained for these roles. They didn't.
Yeah, they weren't strong.
They
and
weren't
athletic
athletes
when they got them.
People will eventually bring up Reva. She used the dark side to keep herself alive. It's because all of these examples exist. It's because we have so much Star Wars.
Fight are over. That shit's for nerds, and besides, nobody even notices anyway. The only thing they're looking at are the pretty colors, so just cast anybody. Seriously, anyone. Give them a stick and tell them to have at it. Don't worry about form or poise or strength discrepancies. If an actor forgets they're carrying a weapon,
wait. So they don't think Eunice is a strong athletic actor, or Chewbacca? That's crazy.
Fight, don't worry about it. We'll just Epstein it in post. Oh, and speaking of extras, if we don't care who you cast as your main characters, you bet your ass we don't give two flying fucks who's in the suits for the faceless bad guys. Hell,
well, they're faceless because Palpatine's the bad guy.
Did you guys care who was in all the stormtrooper armor and stuff?
Versus dark in an epic battle, the crossing of red blades with blue and green, something not seen in the galaxy for 100 years. The fight that
Again.
In the galaxy. Who else in the galaxy saw that?
It's a parrot moment right there.
You can't. Jesus. All right.
Dang it, I'm late. You're doing this video. I have words. The VOD will be available, but yeah, have at it in the chat.
How lame is that? People feeling things in movies? People don't watch movies to feel things anymore.
You don't. You clearly watched all of these movies not feeling a damn thing.
People watch movies to not feel things. Don't you get it? They don't want to watch actors give compelling performances. They want Marvel jokes and slapstick humor. They don't care what a character thinks about the world around them. They want substanceless cameos and key jangling. The real world is...
The way you showed Andor...
He just...
The way he shows Andor in the same sentence that's critically admonishing the lack of these things is baffling. It literally, if you just see nani the fuck, like seriously,
Doom is just more mindless entertainment where they can shut off their brains for 2 hours and stare at some pretty colors. That's it.
Also, if you're watching this Max of Zorro, at any point, if you happen to land on this video, we would love to have you on DYAD in the Force. Come on and have a conversation with us.
Yeah.
In an effort to correct your behavior. Yeah, I mean, like, listen, their narrative is to erase narrative from anything.
What's weird though is he mentioned the cameo thing like it was bad, but like that's what generates emotion on those types of people. Now maybe he doesn't like the cameos. I don't much go for them myself if they feel out of place, or if you rely on a character that's not part of the story's narrative to swoop in and save the day. Always, but like, I don't know, it's just weird. It's weird. We can keep going.
In cinema history, we took that lightsaber and gave it to a fucking janitor and had him face off against an actual Sith Lord. Guess
He's not a Sith Lord.
Not a Sith Lord.
He doesn't watch he doesn't watch Star Wars. I think that's the most. I think that right there is the most incorrect thing he said.
Okay,
like,
so you have a Finn who trained from childhood for combat to be a stormtrooper. And yeah, he was assigned to janitorial stuff, but it doesn't mean he didn't train in combat, in weaponry, and all this stuff forever. And then when he goes out on his first mission, that's when he decides, this ain't the life for him. But like on the other side, Kylo Ren obviously is not a Sith, but if you watch them fight, Kylo Ren's playing with his food. It's not like he ever posed any real threat. And as soon as he got like a lucky strike in there, he just ended it. He ended that man's whole career. I don't know. It was.
Again, this is what they do. It's reducto ad absurdum. They reduce all of these people to the most mind-numbingly empty husks that they can think of.
Guess what happens? He gets his fucking spine melted. Then we proceeded to give the lightsaber to Junk Trader Girl. And by give the lightsaber to Junk Trader Girl, I mean we literally wrote it so that she's suddenly able to use force telekinesis to grab it. She's also suddenly able...
Yeah, no, she didn't pull it. The lightsaber went to her. This is the thing that we always talk about when it comes to media literacy. You can see that Kylo is also pulling it as well. He didn't lose to Rey. It just veered away from him. That's why this has emotional impact when he finally gets it back in The Rise of Skywalker as Ben. Because the reason the lightsaber called to her, it calls to you. The reason it called to her was because she, Rey, represented Ben's light. And as soon as he got it back, the lightsaber went to Ben.
Not only that, but yeah, he didn't get his spine melted. We actually see the jacket later and can trace where the swipe went, and it wasn't on his spine, and it also just scored him.
Able to hold her own against the Sith Lord.
You're saying this in the same sentence she's being pushed back?
Yeah, no, she's getting demolished throughout the scene. Go back.
Even though just
she's in full flight, full
use
on
force
like,
telekinesis to grab it. She's also suddenly able to hold her own against the Sith Lord, even though, just like the janitor, she's never held a lightsaber. You would think that someone...
That line's in The Last Jedi for a reason. It wasn't just there to be there. They're literally acknowledging that he should not have lost. They're acknowledging that he was unstable. So y'all just like heard that line, just like, see? No. Gosh. First, she can hold her own by being pushed back to the brink, to the edge, to the cliff, literally. And then second, she shouldn't have been able to do that because she's never held a lightsaber because Snoke says so. Not really taking into account that that line is there specifically to explain why.
Do you think he's going to acknowledge that he also was just shot in the side with a bowcaster and was bleeding out?
No,
do you think he's going to acknowledge that?
Someone with no combat experience. See that these are the reductos we're talking about. They established she had combat experience. She wasn't the best fighter, but she could hold her own and defend herself against scavengers.
And with no...
Also, at no point in the Star Wars sequel trilogy is Rey better at combat than Kylo Ren. She's never his equal in any of that.
Her instinct would be that of self-preservation, that she would run away from even the possibility of a fight. But see, that's the genius of our subversive writing. Everything that we established that should inform her motivation...
I'm sorry. Go back, because that's exactly what she did. She was running away from the fight. But not only that, the fight on Starkiller Base was an echo of their earlier match, right? She comes in there with a gun and he chases her through the woods of Takodana, and is in flight, right? She loses like 20 rounds at him and he just keeps coming like a goddamn Terminator. So she's in flight, right? Doesn't work. This one, she's in flight and he pushes her to the edge where she can't run anymore. That's the point.
Exactly. Shadow Ranger says, this makes me want to rewatch the sequels. I absolutely encourage it. You know, despite our individual rankings of the sequels, The Last Jedi being the top for me, Force Awakens middling, and The Rise of Skywalker low, I can still watch them and enjoy them. Like, it's, again, a lot of these people will kind of lambaste you for having the ability to enjoy something that this not your favorite thing in the world or you dislike, and they'll call you shills for it, but y'all are being fans. Like, I can watch the Book of Boba Fett and accept its flaws and but also acknowledge the story that it gave Boba Fett. You know, that's the thing about media consumption these days, right? We're in the era of extremes and we talk about it all the time. Like, it's either a 10 or a 1. So you either have the game of the year or it's the worst game you've ever played.
Yeah, and what's funny is like these types of videos, we'll make them, we'll put them out. And because our title isn't going to be, this is the worst thing of all time, and thumbnails where people are crying and dying and shooting lasers out, or you're putting AI women half naked or whatever, whatever they're doing, because we're regular people, we're not going to get the same amount of views, and that sucks. But I'm okay with it though, because I would rather spend time with you guys. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want those people who only want that type of engagement. That's weird.
Yeah, my integrity is not up for sale.
Yeah.
But if you guys would like to support us, we'd appreciate it and welcome it.
This way we can send Blank Slate Junk Trader Girl to the island that Sad Luke is hiding on, so that it feels to the audience like they're the ones going to get Luke. It doesn't...
That never crossed my mind at all.
But that's how I feel about Starkiller. I mean, if Luke is hiding in shame for losing her son, then you would want to send someone that can reignite that flame in Luke, which is Rey, which is why they sent her.
The Ahsoka, we took an aging actress with very little physicality, gave her about 10 minutes of sword training, and then set her up against Hayden fucking Christensen, whose lightsaber is to this day a seamless extension of his body, even after 20 years. He made her performance look absolutely embarrassing, and literally no one cared.
What do you mean no one cared?
I don't know what he's getting at, but to also say Rosario Dawson has no physicality is also weird. And then also to call her an aging actress where you are picking someone who represents the character at a specific age is also weird.
It's also misogynistic.
Yeah, because I mean Hayden is also getting old.
I think he's older than Rosario.
Yeah, no, he is older than her, although they did know each other. They went to the same acting school.
All they saw was that Vader Vadered, and that was good enough. And just in case you need even more examples of how to do this correctly, let's talk about the Acolyte. Oh boy, my favorite one so far. This one takes all the elements we've just established about how we at Disney have characterized lightsaber combat and perfects it to a T. Have characters use lightsabers when they shouldn't, and not use lightsabers when they absolutely should.
Lightsabers have always been used as a source of light. It's just the technology wasn't there back then for it to actually
serve as a thing for light.
Yeah.
You know, like a Cal Kestis, you use it as well. But it's what is he trying to say?
I don't know. That you can't use them as a flashlight.
No, but the whole I mean, I assume he deep throats Anakin's lightsaber on a daily basis, and that's improper usage. But beyond that, you know, Yord using it like that was for a reason. That was part of his character.
Should? Check. Clunky baseball bat looking ass combat? Check.
This is not clunky at all.
That's clunky?
First and foremost, these are choreographed by Chris Cowell. Or am I getting that name right? Cowan? Chris Cowan of Riven XI, of 1,000-pound, like they did the Naruto films, like fan films. He was the original. He was the original critic of the sequel fights, and they brought him on to do the Acolyte fights, and now people like this are roasting his fights. It's insane.
But once again, if you look at Luke on the sail barge, he literally swings it like a baseball bat. And if you look at Luke in his fight against Vader, he swings it like a baseball bat. He swings it like a hammer.
Damage? Check. Ignoring power scaling? Double check. Contradicting lore? Oh, you betcha. Check, check, check. This show...
Nope.
What lore?
He doesn't know anything about lore.
And let the audience cope their way into connecting them for you. This is writing perfected for the modern era. This is peak fire bro. This is Disney Star Wars.
You know what the most ironic thing about this video is that the type of writing that he is describing is not what Disney Star Wars has been. It has been this entire video.
Yeah.
So go on then. Off with you. Go write the next great Star Wars lightsaber fight. Take everything I taught you today and let it blossom into exactly the kind of soulless sludge we're constantly oozing out onto our streaming platform. Sure, we have record low subscribers, terrible review ratios, and our stock is dropping faster than our producer's pants at that one pizza parlor. But it's like I said before.
Wait.
We're constantly oozing out onto our streaming platform. Sure, we have record...
Isn't this from 2023 to 2024 was a pretty huge slog in terms of content for Disney Plus, wasn't it?
Not only was that period a huge slog for content, but Disney, we didn't have it in the United States, but they had cricket everywhere else around the world. They lost the license for cricket, and so the subscribers who wanted cricket left. But to say record low subscribers is crazy. There's literally only one profitable streaming service, and that's Netflix. And then the second closest is Disney Plus, which happens to also be the youngest. So they're actually doing a lot of things really right. But again, I come at this from a investor and a financial background, right? I've worked in the financial industry for like 8 years now. But these people only pull things that support whatever narrative they're going to try and spew. It's nonsense. Like, and also he tries to show this, but like, I don't know. It's weird.
I want to contextualize this also. They may have in this period lost 4.2 million subscribers, but how many total subscribers do they still have? I don't know the number, but being the second largest next to Netflix says something.
Low subscriber.
Sorry, not second largest, but closest to profitability.
Oh, okay.
Now they might actually be the second largest. That part I don't know, but there are more factors in there.
There's terrible review ratios, and our stock is.
Netflix only hit profitability like Jesus in the last few years, and again they're the first.
Disney
and I know I worked for Netflix in 2012.
Yeah, whatever.
But
Stocks
also,
are volatile anyway.
And that's that. So that's the other thing, because I was majorly invested in Disney stock. Because they launched a streaming service, and the whole world went on lockdown. So when I left my job at, I'm not going to say the name of the company, I almost did. I took all of my money and I put into the market. But I bought a ton of Disney stock for one thing, because I knew that streaming services were going to blow up because we were all on lockdown. When we got to the end of lockdown, you know what I did? I sold all my shares. You know why? Because we were in the middle of an unsustainable bubble, and only an idiot would continue to hold on to it. So like anyone who tries to use the financial aspect to say they're doing bad is a moron, because there's a lot more aspects to it. I was looking at Disney stock in a video about lightsabers is crazy stupid. Like Disney has more properties than just Star Wars. They're in more industries. They have theme parks. They have like having bad lightsaber fights doesn't affect Disney stock. I'm gonna tell you that right now.
I also want to kind of bring to attention, what do you think we would see if we showed a 5-year picture?
I mean, if we showed a 5-year picture,
we would see a lower low.
Yeah, I want to say if you looked at it pre-COVID, you would be at around or just below this amount. And during the COVID period, it went up to, I'm going to say, like 180. It was like it was crazy overvaluated. That's why I was like, I'm gonna get I'm gonna sell out and run, because it was a bubble. It was absolutely a bubble. Well, I also invested heavily in oil. Oil started trading negative at one point. God, I bought so much oil and sold that too. Great times.
But what I'm saying is, like, if we look at a much broader picture, we would see that their value is still pretty high, even if in the last 6 months it has lowered.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, anyone here in the chat, like I say this all the time, go look at the value of the Star Wars IP. Go search it up. and understand it was purchased for $4 billion. By the way, $2 billion of that was stock. And so like George Lucas has made way more money than the cash he was given, and is also one of their biggest shareholders, and was like, yeah, I believe in their vision going forward.
Yeah.
Dropping faster than our producer's pants at that one pizza parlor. But it's like I said before, that's all just the haters, the toxic fans, the ones who care so much about Star Wars.
Thanks, Eric.
For all their toxic and hateful rhetoric, I bet that if we decided to...
Low was March 2020 at 85, then hit 200 during COVID, then 81 on September 29, 23. Now at 112. Oh, okay. So this 6-month low in September of 2024 was showing an 88. So based on his video, it should be lower, right?
Yeah, but he's an idiot. So Eric, I bought at 85. Sorry, I bought at like 88, I want to say, and then I sold at 189, and I was like,
that's when he got the good backgrounds. he went from in the X-Wing to like fancy backgrounds.
To give in and start making stories like we did back in the day. If we started putting effort into being consistent with the rules of the universe.
They are very consistent with the rules, and there are no rules. They're very consistent with continuity.
Stories are set and started setting up and paying off meaningful emotional beats, writing likable and nuanced characters with understandable and approachable worldviews.
As he shows likable and nuanced characters. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? This is wild.
Speak to each other like real humans do, not speaking in strange, stunted platitudes or catchphrases.
Luke speaks like a real human.
Relationships, even romances. That again, then all those toxic fans would come crawling right back to us and start giving us their money again and telling their friends to watch our stuff, and then they would give us their money too. Well,
they still watch this stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But for bad faith reasons.
You and your money. That's never going to happen. We're Disney, bitch, and we don't do that here.
I'm going to call this video done.
Yeah, there's not even like a true narrative thread to his video. That was a weird place to go.
I know. Where was the lightsaber conclusion? There was no conclusion at all to any of that.
Anyways, yeah, let's get this off and let's just hang out with the chat.
Yeah, we're off of it now. Anyways, that's the video, guys. Like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. The whole video was wrong. Everyone in the chat knows it. They spent the last 2 hours with us just reacting to the most horrible and most cringe video we've ever seen so far, at the very least. But yeah, we'll see you in the next video.